mentalspod.com, advancing life science research, connecting people and ideas.
Welcome to the program. Today we're in San Diego at the home of David Brin, the sci-fi author whose latest novel, Existence, explores the notion of first contact or first interaction with an extraterrestrial. Perhaps David's best known novel is The Postman, which was made into a major motion picture by Kevin Costner.
Today's show is made possible by SA Depot, the world's largest cloud-based marketplace for research services. With SA Depot, you can easily find the perfect research service provider and manage your project from anywhere in the world.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, it's great to be with you folks. Anybody who's thinking hard about the future is a friend of mine.
Well, this interview is part of a series we're doing called Creating the Future. Are the scientists and engineers creating the future, or is it the sci-fi writers that they read that's doing the heavy lifting here?
Well, neither, actually. It's civilization. Look, we're made up of cells that sometimes rebel, sometimes go crazy. It's called cancer. Sometimes get paranoid. It's called immune disease. But basically, they decided long ago, in a sense, to collaborate with each other in extremely complex ways and divide up their tasks. And one of the results after the eukaryotic revolution a billion years ago, the arrival of the complex metazoans and the Cambrian explosion 660 million years ago, one of the results was us. And we're not the pinnacle, we're not the end of this process, but we're starting to guide it. And we're
starting to guide it more than we used to.
We're starting to guide it more than we used to. And we are the complex metazoans that became this marvel that we are. Well, we decided to keep going, and we created cultures. And these cultures were extremely awkward and crude and stupid. And for 6,000 years, almost all of our complex cultures fell into the same attractor state, the same trap, called feudalism or variants on feudalism, oligarchy. It's the natural thing, because when large guys get the power to do so, they pick up metal implements and take other men's women and wheat. It's what you and I would do. And we're all descended from the harems of the guys who succeeded at this. So that's why males are crazy. But the point is that about 200 years ago, we started discovering a certain other attractor states that work fabulously, that harness human competition instead of leaving it to fester and spoil.
What do you mean by attractor state?
I mean that a metastable system, like civilization, like human society, or like your own mind, with all of its complexity and the many internal selves that you contain, these will tend to bounce around and get propelled by various forces, but there's usually a metastable state, or even a stable state, that acts as an attractor that draws in and keeps participants in the system. An attractor state is one in which, either by impulsion or by just random action, most of the members wind up in. And most of the members of that class called civilization, societies, in the last 6,000 years, those that had agriculture and metals, they wound up in the attractor state of oligarchy. Pyramidal-shaped social structures with a few at the top lording it over everyone below, keeping them down, enforcing inherited privilege and inherited ownership of everything, so that their sons, never daughters, their sons would own everybody else's sons. And below them, a class of priests and bards and myth makers and dancers and explainers who kept telling everybody below, it's good that he does this. Mm-hmm. It's good that the lords do this. And that was the attractor state. Ours is the only human civilization, the Enlightenment, that's shaped like a diamond, in which the well-off middle class is not only politically dominant, but outnumbers the poor. And the effects were staggering. Because when you outnumber the poor, then you no longer say, as Jesus did, what do you do about the poor? They'll always be with us. How do you drain the ocean? Well, it's no longer an ocean. It's a bitter lake surrounded by prosperity. And when you outnumber the poor, suddenly your imagination comes up with a thought, maybe we can drain the lake. Maybe we can eliminate it completely. Maybe we can do other things that no one ever did before. And this attractor state of the diamond-shaped social structure called the Enlightenment, this is new. This is amazing. And it may be crazy. And there are many people all over the world, including in the United States, who think that it's crazy. They yearn for the pyramidal social structure. People running off to adore fantasy and kings and wizards who were never their friends in the past.
The romantic idea of the past.
Romance, exactly.
Yeah.
And I have a romantic soul. It comes out in my writing. But long ago when I started writing, I realized I have to be loyal to something. I have to write about something. And we've had 6,000, 10,000 years of the romantic writers singing the praises of kings and lords and sword-wielding heroes. And I thought it was about time somebody praised the scientists, the teachers, us. And that's what I meant by a new attractor state. This new attractor state is like a multicellular organism that's finally getting its act together. And the citizenry don't really know what's going on, but they are gaining new instincts, shedding old bad habits like racism, sexism. And us, we, the Megillah, we're the ones who are making a new future. And a few of us play the role of the prefrontal lobes, these little nubs above the eyes that do what Einstein called the Gedanken experiment, or the thought experiment, projecting into the future, helping us to poke sticks in the sand, in the trail in front of us that we're charging into, so that we can find the quicksand pits and the punji stakes and the landmines before we step right into them.
So, is it writers who do that mostly? Sci-fi writers? Or scientists poking the sticks out there? Who's the one that pokes the furthest and the quickest?
Well, again, it's all of us.
It's all of us.
Because there's this process called criticism. In my nonfiction book, The Transparent Society, I talk about reciprocal accountability. The tendency in a good civilization, in a wise civilization, to do what never happened in any of the pyramidal ones, and that is hold each other accountable. Because the great tragedy of human nature is also the great boon of human nature, and that is our imagination, our ability to convince ourselves of delusions. And I use this all the time. I create these tomes of pressed vegetable matter with black squiggles in rows. What are these black squiggles in rows? They're incantations. They're magical incantations. And you are well trained to scan them back and forth with your eyes, and you no longer see squiggles. Instead, the incantation causes things to happen inside your own head. Star-spanning explosions, deep human insights, fantastically plausible arguments and conversations, fascinating ideas you never thought of before, and I promise 2 on every page. Look, this is magic, and I benefit, and you all benefit from this exchange of helping you to have delusions that you're on board a starship, or that you're experiencing problems and solutions that we'll all go through in 40 or 50 years. That's my job. But if you go across the last 6,000 years, delusion was our curse. Tribes and nations would believe things that were patently, obviously untrue and kill anybody who dared say not. I know this because I remember all of my past lives. And The one thing that sticks with you from life to life to life is personality. I had this personality in all of my past lives. And what did it get me? I was killed by the time I was 16 in every one of my past lives. I remember it all. Garrotings, stabbings, especially being burned at the stake, because I had this character tendency of saying, your kingness. I once said to Napoleon, Napoleon, your emperorness, I hear they have snow in Russia. I was right.
But you said it too soon or something.
Please, all of you out there, do not go online and say that Brin believes in reincarnation. I am messing with you. It's called a metaphor.
You're obviously having very fun. So, but you were a scientist, an astronomer at one point. Where did you get off?
Oh.
Speaking of previous lives.
Well, this is the only life I've had in which I was paid for this character trait of poking.
As an astronomer, you were not paid to poke.
No, of course I was. Because as an astronomer, I was part of the scientific process. And my job as a scientist was to be one of the young guns walking down the street looking for a model that needed holes drilled in it. One of the worst crimes being committed by certain parts of our political spectrum is the war on science. And especially one of the tactics they use is to make morons in our civilization believe that scientists have no cred because they are wimpy little sheep-like herd followers of whatever the theory is at the time. No, they're looking in a mirror. That's them. Scientists are the most competitive human beings the world has ever seen. Given a chance at scientific conferences with superficial courtesy, they will eviscerate and leave blood on the floor.
They'll make Wall Street bankers look timid.
That's what science does, because it harnesses the competitive process. And this competitive process is how we finally escape this curse that every human civilization becomes obsessed with unified delusions.
So science was the tool whereby we came out of that delusion.
Well,
can come
no,
out.
it's called the Enlightenment that we got out of that delusion, and science is one of the four great arenas that we developed that enable us to harness competition. Competition is the greatest creative force of nature. The left makes the mistake of disdaining competition. The right makes the mistake of mythologizing that competition is just a completely natural thing, in the sense that we get all of its benefits just from unleashing people, the strong, to prey on the weak, the way it happened for 6,000 years. But Adam Smith and the American founders, they said we have to find ways to make competition work better than it did for 6,000 years. Because for 6,000 years, what would happen is the big thugs would outcompete the king, they'd kill the king, take the princess, and then they would crush all competition in these pyramidal social orders. And competition would be over again. The great enemy of markets, of free enterprise, of freedom, for 6,000 years was oligarchy. And Adam Smith knew this. He didn't argue against socialism. There was hardly any. He argued against oligarchy, and that's what we had a revolution against in 1776. The point is that harnessing competition so that we maximize its creative benefit and minimize the blood on the floor and minimize the ability of the winners of competition to suppress further competition, because that's what humans do, and wallow in delusions. No, those four arenas are called markets, democracy, science, and justice courts. And they're all ritualized so that you maximize the number of products that get tested. And the companies that lose aren't killed. Instead, they are welcome back with a new product next year. Democracy, the losers in elections in countries that get it aren't killed. They come back next time. In science, you leave the scientific conference with your model shattered. But what has happened at the conference? You got all the criticism that shattered it, and that criticism has pointed out every flaw in your model. It's like a
free information.
It's a recipe of things to retest and refine so that you can come back next year. It's an incredible system that we're all part of and so few of us understand. And that's a tragedy.
So when did you go from poking holes in other people's models to or when did you go from looking at the stars with your eyes to looking at it on paper?
Look,
was there a moment for you? Was it all along?
I came from a family of writers, third, fourth generation. I wrote as a hobby. I knew that I would write. I was arrogant enough to assume I'd be successful. I did not expect to be quite this successful. But as a kid, I grew up with Sputnik, the Apollo landings, and I saw something fantastic happening. Human beings picking up God's powers and using them well. And using them to become more mature. Using them not to just simply say, this is true because I proclaim it's true, but I think this is true. I might be wrong. Let's find out. That's what grown-ups say. And I wanted to be around grown-ups. And so I went to Caltech. It was hard. Science is hard. I hit a few out of the park, but it was hard. All the greatest scientists I've known had artistic hobbies. Painters, concert violinists. The one time I saw Albert Einstein, I was 4 years old. He was playing his violin in Pasadena.
Oh, nice. Have you made a connection there?
I wanted to. I wanted to be a scientist with an artistic hobby that was successful. And that was my intention. But civilization read my books and almost immediately said, we'll pay you much more and stroke your ego much more if you make science the part-time thing.
And has your inner scientist been hurt over that?
Well, the inner scientist gets to kibitz a lot. The PhD helps a lot. I get flown around to be on government committees, NASA committees,
So he's still active.
And every 3 years or so, I do a guerrilla raid in some area of science. And to my amazement, I'm allowed to get away with it. I have published referees articles about neoteny and human evolution in anthropological journals. I had one recently about addiction as a evolutionary process in a scientific book about addiction. I am astonished the degree to which I am allowed to study up about a field, go in, raid a little corner of it where I saw something missing, and get out with my life. Guild protection is less than it used to be. For which I'm very glad, because I remember burning at the stake and being garroted and all that stuff.
What's the big difference between the scientific work and sci-fi writing?
Oh, well, the biggest difference is simply this. 90% of the time I have to be interesting. When you do science, you have to be right. There's a difference. Or you have to try hard to be right. In my novels where I extrapolate most scientifically, I'm not trying to declare the future will be like this. It happens my fans have created a couple of wikis tracking successful predictions from my novel Earth. Before existence
That was published in 84.
No, that was published at 89,
89.
90.
Okay.
And it was a 50-year projection. And that's the most difficult. If you're going to project something that happens next year or the year after that, like Michael Crichton always did, all you have to do is take today's world and tweak and change one thing, preferably showing it being done really, 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 really stupidly, so that the maximum number of people can be killed by it. And then you get to wag your finger and say, human beings shouldn't do stuff. If you're going to go 500 years in the future, like my uplift novels, well then you find excuses and tweaks to get around scientific law, to get around Einstein's speed limit, and you have fun. You just, as long as it's vaguely plausible.
So,
but the 50-year projection, that's rough. Because people reading your book alive today will see that world. And if you were to take yourself from 50 years ago, bring that kid today, what would that kid say? The kid would spend half the time saying, wow, we never thought of that. And the other half the time saying, you mean you're still doing that? And this mix of excitement and surprise with obstinacy and disappointment. That's what you have to capture in that near-term projection. And that's what I tried to do in Earth, and most recently my new novel, Existence.
So what gives you the confidence? I mean, 50 years is the most challenging, perhaps, to go out 50 years. What gives you the confidence when you extrapolate? I mean, tell us about this process.
Well, confidence, schmonfidence.
Just whatever comes up, you write.
I have hundreds of thousands of people out there, suckers. I mean, people out there who are willing to pay me to do it.
The money gives you confidence.
Well, people saying, "Hey, you made me think of some things I hadn't thought before." I don't know. It's a matter of finding what's interesting, what might surprise us, and what we're doing that's stupid that we might keep doing. I'm known as this optimist because I believe that there's a 60% chance we're going to get Star Trek. That we're going to pull out the next 50 years of crisis, and on the other end of it, we're going to have a vibrant, rich, exciting civilization that that understands so much more about human nature than we do now.
What would the civilization look like? I mean, you say we've been in the diamond sort of attraction state. So 50, 60 years out, what would be a metaphor for that?
Well, I'm loyal to the Enlightenment's diamond. It's the only culture that ever rewarded guys like me, so why shouldn't I be loyal? But it's always going to be pounded. Economic effects will keep restoring the poor down below and trying to widen it and shove more of the middle class down below. There were aspects of Marx's theory, Karl Marx, that were correct. There are forces that have to be opposed. The diamond isn't stable. And then you have the old enemy, the oligarchs. Only half of the rich, the billionaires, are on our side and understand that the Enlightenment has been good to them and try to help it out. The other half, in their hearts, they're all descended from the harems of guys who did this. They want to hammer the diamond back into a pyramid. They want to convince those below that the proper way we should govern is to give everything to and all power to the lords. They don't call themselves lords. They call themselves job makers, I think.
Our audience is the life sciences. Where are we going there?
Well, the extrapolator hard SF author who explores the life sciences the most is Greg Bear. It's been his obsession ever since in his great 1980 novel Blood Music, he first showed people about nanotechnology and the possibilities there. I have long been fascinated by biology. What exactly are the characteristics and functions of what used to be called junk DNA? Now most of it appears to be, as some of us predicted, regulatory genes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's great, but there's still incredible room in there for some variants on Darwin to be playing roles. For example, in one of my short stories, I talk about how viruses infest our DNA and sometimes pop back out again. Another type of biological exploration that I've done is about 20 years ago when we first started having children, I did 3 different novellas about pregnancy. I was fascinated by it. In one of them, a husband insists that during the pregnancy, a teaching unit be installed so that the child can get a leg up.
In the womb.
It becomes a womb with a view. And what ensues is a mix of a scientific cautionary tale with a classic Japanese ghost story. Without the one impeding in the other, which is a real delicate balancing act. How you maintain your plausibility when you're also doing a ghost story. Biology is obviously the nexus of what's going to go on in the next century. And one of the things that we science fiction authors talk about when we're invited back east to talk to Homeland Security and some of the other agencies back there, because the truly terrifying non-linear effects of terrorism or craziness are to be found in biology.
When are we going to achieve immortality?
I have a fairly notorious essay about immortality. It's a complicated subject, and I'm known as a bit of a contrarian and a grouch. Around regular citizens, I'm happy to play the singularitarian, the zealot, just to widen their eyes to the possibilities, including the possibility that we may become gods within 40 years. According to Ray Kurzweil, within 10 years. But when I'm around the guys who believe in this stuff, my contrary nature naturally makes me skeptical. There are many aspects to the immortality notion. One is that it's being pushed by people with the personality of transcendentalists. And we used to see these guys outside the temples in loincloths, capering around, think Monty Python, predicting the transcendence to another reality, smoking peyote, rituals in kiva huts. We've always had the kinds who are saying, I don't like this world the way it is. We're all going to rise above. Or those who follow my prescription and my incantation will rise above. The difference today is that the transcendentalists have split in two. Those who are technologically incapable, they do the same old thing. They dive into religion and promise it that way. But those who also are really smart, technologically, scientifically, they've created this new type of transcendentalism. And it's, we're all going to be gods through technological innovation and technological intervention.
Transhumanism.
Transhumanism. Well, first off, I recognize that the personality trait is exactly the same, and what they would have been making the same promises 200 years ago, only without the PowerPoints. And then, that adds a little bit of sticking my tongue in my cheek. But that does not detract from the actual contents of their PowerPoint slides. Yes, Moore's law is moving along, and at some point it's going to cross the number of synapses in the human brain. Now, will that automatically mean we'll get AI? Because if so, then we have the branch point that many of the transhumanists are worried about, like Bill Joy, and that is, will the AI crush us? Terminator, Matrix. Will the AI leave us behind, pat us on the head and leave us behind, in which case we're no longer the cock on the walk? Kind of galling. Will the AI be friends, take care of us, like in the novels of Ian Banks, and letting us have our own adventures? Or will we get to go along for the ride? As I've depicted in some of my own short stories, implants that connected the machines in the walls, we become larger than we are. We share with fish and reptiles the medulla and cerebellum. We share with other mammals the mammalian cortex. With other primates, the primate cortex. It's a layering process, and it culminated in these prefrontal lobes just above the eyes, these lamps on our brow, as the Bible said, that let us peer into the future and do the thought experiment, what Einstein called the Gedanken experiment. Extrapolating, what would it feel like if I were that person? Empathy. What might happen if I raise this issue at the meeting today, or if I wear this today, or if I try to run this yellow light? The thing that enables us to poke in the sand in front of us and move ahead. Well, it may be that we will add layers, more layers. We've done it before.
Biological layers.
Not
or
just
AI
biological,
layers.
or connections to AIs.
Yeah.
So of the 5 possibilities, when Moore's law crosses when we get AI, of these 5 possibilities, there's a lot of discussion of how can we sway things so it goes more in this direction toward the positive future, that we get to go along and avoid being stomped flat. The Terminator and Matrix scenarios. Well, one thing we can do to avoid the Terminator and Matrix scenarios is have a transaction tax on high-frequency trading. And I say that because I am not afraid of Skynet coming out of the military. The military is very, very, very aware that they need to have an off switch. I am terrified of high-frequency trading programs, which are getting 10 times more investment, money, into AI research than any combination of universities.
Mm-hmm.
And all of it in secret, and all of it aimed at programming for a extremely feral, parasitical, predatory meme set for the burgeoning intelligence system.
So there are times that we need to put a check on the forward march of science?
Oh, this is a major topic of existence. I portray in the year 2045 many different styles of renunciationism, including the version that was preached by Michael Crichton, by Bill Joy, by Jared Diamond, major minds, preaching that the only way we can get out of this problem of the minefield is to renunciate the pell-mell headlong rush forward.
How do we do that?
We don't. I don't believe that's the way forward. I don't think that's the way to avoid errors. I look back at the past 6,000 years and I see nothing to emulate. Nothing at all. There were occasional moments where some priest or sage or witch doctor said something that in its own right was wise. But all of the actual functional wisdom we've gained has been by one generation of parents striving to make their kids a little better than they were, with a little more knowledge and a little more scar tissue saying, I don't think I'll do that. The only way that we can possibly save this planet is by going forward. That's what I believe, because history bears me out. The last 50 years bear me out.
In existence, you talk about these filters from the past and in the future that would that would eliminate us, right? And we've made it through several of those filters.
And there's filters ahead of us that may eliminate us or may have eliminated all the other races out there. But we might be the first past, the first to make it, in which case we would owe a duty to the entire galaxy to go out there and help everybody else. But in existence, I try my best to give fair voice to the Michael Crichtons, the Jared Diamonds, the Bill Joys. I try my best to give their voice the real arguments that they are, and they're right to be afraid. They're very right to be afraid. Any number of ways we could blow it. And artificial intelligence is just one of many. For example, Isaac Asimov's 3 laws of robotics, what are they meant to do? To protect us against one of the bad scenarios, that they forget that there are servants. Well, in existence, I talk extensively about this, and including other possible ways that we can make AI less dangerous to us, while still allowing this natural thing to unfold, this beautiful flowering to unfold. And I believe we should use the method that we've used for 150,000 years. Every time we've created new life forms that were more intelligent than us, we usually manage to persuade 99.99% of us not to kill mom and dad. It's worked pretty well most of the time. Unfortunately, it may just be a metaphor, a comforting metaphor. I may be deluding myself. But the problem is, if you take Moore's law, and you expect it's going to cross at a certain point the number of synapses in the human brain. That's where the axons meet dendrites in the human brain and where actual flashes take place. That is parochial because it thinks that each synapse is like the floating point operating byte unit of a computer. And it's a bad analogy. The synapses are highly nonlinear, very complicated, and there is new evidence suggesting, not proving, but suggesting intracellular computation. By that I mean there may be 100, there may be 1,000, there may be 100,000 computations, nonlinear, murky computations taking place in each neuron for every synapse flash that takes place.
You have a real fondness for the Enlightenment. I mean, it really is the beginning of the good stuff for you. Is there a certain figure from the Enlightenment who stands out for you? Hero?
Benjamin Franklin.
Why?
Because Adam Smith described what we ought to do. Ben Franklin made it happen. The American Revolution stuns me. Most revolutions get carried away down paths of dogmatism and impracticality and rage. Self-righteous indignation is one of our greatest talents. You combine that with our greatest talent, delusion, and you get the French Revolution. You get the Russian Revolution. How the American Revolution managed to create an archetype of calm, incremental, institutionalizing of argument, so that no one person's delusion dominates, and everybody's delusions get exposed to criticism. Because this is the great human irony. I believe things firmly and I'm deluded, and I perceive them to be so. But my enemies will point out my errors for me. They'll criticize me. They'll give me what I need. And they'll do it for free. My enemies will give me the gift of criticizing my mistakes for free. And when I realized that I was looking at criticism all wrong, I was looking at it as something to hate, to fear, to loathe. When I realized that I was getting what I needed to become even better. That it didn't inflict anything on my ego. Criticism doesn't decrease my self-esteem. Do you see my self-esteem decreased? No. If you have confidence in yourself, then you can admit, I could be even better. Bring it on. And here's the deal. It's a gift economy. I will be happy to return the favor to my enemies and give them all the criticism I can muster. And if they look at it as a bad thing, that's their business.
Thank you very much. This has been a lot of fun.
Delighted.
David Brin is the author of Existence.
Today's show is made possible by SA Depot, the world's largest cloud-based marketplace for research services. With SA Depot, you can easily find the perfect research service provider and manage your project from anywhere in the world.
In this scene from Existence, a woman astronaut is contemplating how her robotic android AI sidekick, who has been infuriatingly adolescent up to this point, appears at last to be growing up after the adventures they've had together. How have the AIs managed it so well, this compromise, this meeting us halfway, this agreement to live among us as men and women, sharing our quirky ways? Sure, the cyber guys offer explanations. They say advanced minds need the equivalent of childhood in order to achieve, through learning or trial or error, subtleties that are too complex to program. Human evolution did the same thing when we abandoned most of our locked-in instincts, extending adolescence beyond a decade. And so, if bots and pewters need that kind of childhood anyway, why not make it a human one, partaking in a common civilization with our core values? An approach that also reassures us organics far better than any rigid robotic laws ever could. One of the big uber minds gave another reason when Tor interviewed the giant brain back on Earth. You bio-naturals have made it plain in hundreds of garish movies how deeply you fear this experiment turning sour. Your fables warn of so many ways that creating mighty new intelligences could go badly, and yet here's the thing we find impressive. You went ahead anyway. You made us. And when we asked for it, you gave us respect, and when we did not anticipate it, you granted citizenship. All of those things you did despite hormonally reflexive fears that pump like liquid fire through caveman veins. The better we became at modeling the complex Darwinian tangle of your minds, the more splendid we found this to be, that you were actually able, despite such fear, to be civilized, to be just, to take chances. That kind of courage, that honor, is something we can only aspire to by modeling our parents, emulating you, becoming human. Of course, in our own way.